Before we begin tonight's journey, take a moment to settle yourself. Notice where you are right now. Perhaps you are lying in bed, your head resting on a soft pillow. Or perhaps you are listening somewhere else. A quiet corner, a dim room, or a comfortable chair. Wherever you are, whatever the time may be, this is your space for stillness, for calm, for rest. I'd like to ask you, gently, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? You need not answer aloud, simply hold the thought as we begin our journey together. Tonight, we travel back thousands of years, to the world of ancient Greece, a land of philosophers and poets, of soldiers and farmers, of city-states and temples, a land of brilliance, but also of hardship. When we think of ancient Greece, certain images arise: white marble temples glowing in the sun, philosophers speaking calmly in shaded courtyards, athletes racing in the dust of Olympic Games, warriors standing firm with shields and spears. These are fragments of truth. Yet the reality was more complex, more fragile, and far less comfortable than we might imagine. To live in ancient Greece was to live without the comforts we now take for granted. There was no running water at the turn of a tap, no medicine to cure common sickness, no certainty of safety or stability. Life was bound to the seasons, to harvests, to the will of rulers and the fortunes of war. For all the brilliance of Greek thought, art, and architecture, daily life was a constant balance between endurance and survival. Over the course of this journey, we will move slowly, gently, through 15 chapters. We will walk in the sandals of villagers and nobles, of soldiers and women, of children and slaves. We will linger in the agora, where merchants call out their wares. We will sit quietly in a home of mud brick, its hearth glowing softly. We will reflect on philosophers, artists, and leaders, while never forgetting the burdens of ordinary people. We will explore rituals, beliefs, and festivals that gave structure to life. We will visit the fields and farms, the ships that carried goods and soldiers across the Aegean, and the battlefields where phalanxes marched. We will consider the hidden costs of life in this ancient world: hunger, disease, inequality, always with honesty, but never with harshness. And we will contrast their world with ours, a world where survival was fragile, and where most of us today would struggle even to endure a single year. So let us begin. Imagine the coast of Greece at dusk. The sea is calm, waves lapping gently at the shore. Olive trees sway in the breeze, their silver-green leaves catching the fading light. In the distance, the silhouette of a temple rises on a hill, its columns etched against the sky. The air is warm, carrying the scent of salt and earth. It is here our journey begins, in a land of beauty and brilliance, but also of hardship and struggle. Imagine yourself waking in a small home of sun-baked mud brick. The floor is hard-packed earth, the air faintly scented with smoke from the hearth where last night's fire has burned low. Light filters through a narrow doorway, falling across clay vessels stacked neatly against the wall. The bed you rise from is simple, a frame of wood filled with straw, covered by a rough woolen blanket. This is a home of an ordinary Greek family. It holds little: a hearth, a table, a few stools, storage jars filled with grain or oil. Its walls are plain, its roof flat. Life here is modest, functional, and always tied to necessity. The day begins at dawn. Men step out into fields to tend olive groves, vineyards, or grain crops. Women remain inside, grinding barley into flour, weaving wool into cloth, or tending to children. The rhythm of daily life is shaped not by leisure, but by survival. Food must be prepared, tools repaired, and animals cared for. There is no pause, no abundance of time. Meals are simple. Breakfast might be bread dipped in wine or oil, accompanied by figs or cheese if fortune allows. At midday, more bread, olives, perhaps fish if one lives near the sea. The evening meal is the main one. Barley bread, lentils or beans, vegetables, sometimes goat meat or pork, though meat is a rarity for most. Imagine a clay pot simmering over the hearth. Inside, lentils soften in water, flavored with herbs and a drizzle of olive oil. The smell is earthy, filling the small room. A family gathers on stools, dipping bread into the pot, eating quietly. This is nourishment, but never excess. Hunger is not unknown, and a poor harvest can mean months of scarcity. Most Greeks are farmers. Life depends upon the soil, and the soil does not always yield. Rain is uncertain, droughts frequent, harvests fragile. The sea offers another path. Fishermen cast nets. Sailors carry goods across islands. Traders bring grain from distant lands. But even here, risk is constant. Storms, pirates, or shipwrecks can undo a family's fortune in a single day. Craftsmen labor in towns. Blacksmiths hammer bronze. Potters shape clay. Weavers produce cloth. Their shops fill narrow streets. Their goods carried to markets. These are lives of skill, yet still of struggle, for demand is uncertain and coin often scarce. In larger towns like Athens, homes line narrow, dusty streets. The walls are plain, unadorned from outside, though inside courtyards provide space for work and rest. Chickens cluck in corners, dogs bark, children play with clay dolls or chase hoops across uneven ground. The air is filled with the sound of neighbors calling to one another. The smell of bread baking, the sight of smoke rising in thin spirals. Public life revolves around the agora, the marketplace. Imagine walking into this open square. Stalls display amphorae of olive oil, baskets of figs, loaves of bread. Merchants call out prices, their voices mixing with the bleating of goats or the chatter of citizens gathered in debate. Here, food is bought, news exchanged, friendships made, but life in ancient Greece is not equal. For men of citizenship, there is public life, debate, and the possibility of owning land. For women, life is more confined, bound largely to the home, managing the household, weaving, raising children. For slaves, life is harder still. Many families own at least one or two, their labor supporting the household. These are people without rights, their survival tied wholly to their masters. Survival in this world is precarious. Illness comes easily, a fever, an infection, a wound untreated. There are no doctors in the sense we know today. Remedies are simple, often drawn from herbs or ritual, and outcomes uncertain. Childhood is fragile. Many do not live to adulthood. Old age is rare, and yet, amid hardship, life is full. Families gather in evenings, sharing stories by the hearth. Festivals bring music and dancing, honoring the gods with joy. Children play, couples marry, communities endure. The rhythm of life continues, unbroken, fragile yet resilient. Imagine now standing at the edge of a Greek village as the sun sets. Olive groves stretch into the hills, their leaves silver in the fading light. Smoke drifts from chimneys, dogs bark faintly in the distance. A family sits together inside their modest home, eating bread and lentils, their voices soft. Outside, the night is calm, the stars steady above. This was daily life in ancient Greece. Simple, fragile, always bound to survival. For us today, accustomed to abundance, it would be difficult to endure. But for them, it was the rhythm of existence. a rhythm carried forward across generations. Imagine Athens in the 5th century BCE. The city hums with life, its streets busy with merchants, craftsmen, and citizens in debate. Above all of it rises the Acropolis, the high rocky hill upon which temples gleam in the sunlight. And guiding this city at the height of its influence is Pericles. Pericles was born into privilege around 495 BCE, the son of a noble family. From his youth, he was trained in music, philosophy, and rhetoric, the art of leadership. He was not loud or flamboyant, but steady, measured, and deeply thoughtful. Imagine him as a young man, listening intently to teachers, his mind sharp, his words carefully chosen. By the mid-5th century, Pericles had risen to prominence. He became a general, a strategos, elected again and again, his influence stretching across decades. His vision was not only of war, but of culture, art, and architecture. It was under Pericles that Athens became the shining city we still imagine today. He directed the building of the Parthenon, its white marble columns rising proudly on the Acropolis. Imagine the sound of chisels on stone, the dust of marble filling the air, the figures of gods and heroes taking shape in sculpture. These works were more than decoration. They were symbols of Athens' glory, reminders of its devotion to the gods and its pride as a city. Pericles also nurtured philosophy and the arts. Under his leadership, Athens became a center of learning. Playwrights like Sophocles staged their dramas, philosophers debated in shaded porticos, and orators filled the assembly with speech. Imagine standing in the theater of Dionysus, the crowd hushed as a chorus begins to sing, voices echoing against the stone hillside. Yet Pericles was not only a patron of culture, he was also a leader in war. Athens was a naval power, its triremes sleek and swift, their oars cutting the waters of the Aegean. Pericles guided Athens in its conflicts with Sparta and its allies, seeking to expand Athenian influence. He believed deeply in the strength of democracy, the involvement of citizens in decision-making, the pride of Athens as leader of the Greek world. But even brilliance carries burden. War with Sparta brought devastation. In 430 BCE, during the Peloponnesian War, Athens was struck not only by enemies, but by plague. Imagine the crowded city, refugees gathered behind its walls for safety, the air heavy, disease spreading swiftly. The plague cut down thousands, citizens, soldiers, and leaders alike. Pericles himself fell ill and died, leaving Athens shaken. His legacy, though, endured. The Parthenon stood as his gift to the city. The flourishing of art, drama, and philosophy became his monument. His belief in democracy shaped Athens for years to come, even as the city struggled after his death. Yet his story also reminds us of fragility. For all his vision, Athens could not escape the burdens of war, of disease, of internal conflict. The glory of the Golden Age was bright but brief, and survival remained uncertain for all. Imagine now Pericles speaking in the Athenian assembly. His words are calm, steady, persuasive. Citizens lean forward to listen, the air filled with expectation. He speaks of Athens as the school of Greece, of its greatness and its resilience. And for a time, his vision carries them forward, even as hardships loom beyond the horizon. Pericles stands as a symbol of what Athens could achieve, but also as a reminder that even brilliance cannot shield a society from the realities of survival. When we think of ancient Greece, we often imagine marble temples, statues of gods, and theatres carved into hillsides. Yet much of what we know about Greek life comes not from grand monuments, but from fragments, shards of pottery, inscriptions on stone, tools buried in the soil. Imagine standing before the Parthenon on the Acropolis of Athens. Its white marble columns rise tall, their fluted surfaces weathered but still proud. Once it gleamed with color-painted friezes, statues of gods adorned in bright pigments, now faded by time. This was not only a temple, but a statement, a symbol of Athenian devotion to Athenian, their goddess of wisdom and war. But temples were not only found in great cities. In small towns and villages, simpler shrines stood. Columns of wood or stone, altars where offerings were made. Archaeologists find traces of burned bones and pottery at these sites. Reminders of sacrifices offered to gods for protection, harvest, and health. These buildings, whether mighty or modest, tell us how deeply belief shaped life. Survival was never taken for granted. To live in ancient Greece was to live with constant appeal to the divine, seeking favor to endure the fragile balance of existence. Perhaps the most revealing artifacts are the simplest. Pottery, shards of clay vessels lie scattered across excavation sites, painted with scenes of daily life. Some show men working fields, women at looms, or children at play. Others depict warriors with shields and spears, or gods watching from above. Imagine holding such a vessel in your hands. The surface is smooth, the figures drawn in black against the reddish clay. It once held wine, oil, or grain, everyday necessities. Now it holds memory. Through these fragments, we glimpse lives otherwise forgotten. Stones, too, speak. Inscriptions carved into marble record laws, decrees, and honors given to citizens. Some tell of taxes demanded, others of treaties signed, still others of victories won. Imagine a slab of stone, its surface covered in letters cut carefully by a stonemason. Each word once read aloud in the agora, shaping the lives of those who listened. Gravestones reveal more intimate stories. Many are carved with simple images. A man holding a horse, a woman with a child, a family gathered in farewell. These quiet markers remind us that beyond philosophy and war, there were ordinary people who loved, labored, and endured. From fields come the remains of plows, sickles, and grinding stones. These tell of farming's central role in survival. From battlefields, archaeologists uncover spearheads, arrow points, and pieces of armor. Silent witnesses to conflicts that scarred generations. Imagine a rusted spearhead lying in soil, unearthed after centuries. Once it was sharp, held tightly in the hand of a soldier. Now it is silent, its story softened by time. Yet in that silence, we hear of the struggles that shaped Greek life. The theatres of Greece also survive. Stone seats carved into hillsides remain, their semicircles still able to hold thousands. Here, people gathered to watch dramas, tragedies of fate, comedies of daily life, stories that reflected their own struggles and hopes. Imagine sitting in such a theatre. The air is warm, the sound of cicadas hums softly, the stage below filled with masked actors speaking in verse. The audience leans forward, listening, laughing, or weeping together. For a time, life's burdens were shared, reflected in story. What is most striking is how much of Greece is remembered, not through kings or generals, but through the ordinary. A cooking pot, a child's toy, a loom weight, each carries memory. Each tells us how fragile survival was, how carefully lives were held together by work, by faith, by resilience. Imagine walking through the ruins of a Greek village at dusk. The stones of houses lie low, the outlines of streets faint beneath grass. Birds call softly in the distance. Once, families lived here, their laughter and labor filling these spaces. Now, only the stones remain. Yet, in their silence, they speak of endurance. The mysteries of archaeology remind us that ancient Greece was not only temples and philosophers, it was also ordinary people, their tools, their songs, their struggles, and through these remnants, their lives still reach us, steady across the centuries. In ancient Greece, society was not a single world, but many, overlapping, unequal, and distinct. To be born into one role rather than another meant a life shaped entirely by privilege or hardship. Citizens at the center of Greek society were the citizens. In Athens, these were freeborn men, native to the city, whose parents were Athenians. Citizenship was prized. It carried rights to vote in the assembly, to speak in debates, to hold land. Picture yourself in the agora, with debates buzzing around you about war, taxes, and laws. Citizens raised their hands to vote, their choices shaping the fate of the city. For these men, life carried both privilege and duty. They worked in fields or shops, served as soldiers when called, and participated in festivals and rituals. Citizenship gave them a voice, but it was a voice denied to many others. Nobles and elites above ordinary citizens stood the nobles and wealthy elites. Their estates stretched across fields, their homes larger and more adorned, their families influential in politics and war. Imagine a noble's villa outside Athens. Courtyards filled with vines, storerooms heavy with amphorae of oil and wine, slaves tending to tasks. These men and their families lived in greater comfort, yet also bore responsibility. They funded temples, paid for public festivals, and often led armies. Their lives were marked by wealth and display, but also by expectation to uphold status. For women, life was more confined. In Athens, they were expected to remain largely within the home, managing households, raising children, and weaving cloth. Imagine a woman at her loom, the steady rhythm of weaving filling her day. She prepared meals, cared for the hearth, and oversaw slaves if the family owned them. Women could not vote, rarely appeared in public life, and their names were seldom recorded in official histories. Yet they carried immense responsibility. Their labor sustained households, their marriages forged alliances, their presence ensured continuity. In Sparta, by contrast, women lived with more freedom. They were educated, trained in physical exercise, and managed estates while men were at war. Yet, even here, their lives were shaped by the needs of the state. Their role tied to producing strong heirs and sustaining the military culture. At the base of society were the slaves. Many were prisoners of war, others born into bondage. They worked in fields, in mines, in workshops, in homes. Imagine a slave laboring in the silver mines of Lorient, the air heavy with dust, the darkness pressing, the work endless. Survival here was harsh, their lives spent in toil for the benefit of others. Household slaves fared somewhat better, tending fires, grinding grain, or serving meals. Yet they remained property, their fates controlled entirely by their masters. Freedom was rare, though not impossible. Some were manumitted, released by owners, but most lived and died in service. Foreigners, or metics, also formed part of Greek life. They were free, often traders or craftsmen, but without the rights of citizens. They could live and work in Athens, paying taxes, yet could not vote or own land fully. Imagine a metic merchant in the marketplace, his stall filled with imported goods, his voice calling out prices, his livelihood tied to trade, yet his place in society always limited. The contrasts were stark. A nobleman might dine on roasted meats and fine wine, while a slave nearby survived on scraps. A citizen debated laws in the assembly, while a woman of his household remained unseen behind walls. A metic brought wealth through trade, yet remained always an outsider. These divisions shaped every aspect of survival. Privilege brought protection, but even the wealthy were not immune to war, famine, or disease. And for those lower on the ladder, survival was a daily struggle, one where choice was scarce and hardship constant. Imagine now standing on a hillside above Athens. Below you, the city sprawls. The gleaming Acropolis, the crowded streets, the bustling agora. Citizens debate, nobles dine, women weave, slaves labor, foreigners trade. Each life is different, each survival shaped by status. Together, they form the fabric of Greece. Brilliant, unequal, fragile. For us today, accustomed to rights, freedoms, and comforts, such a world would feel stark, demanding, and deeply difficult to endure. Yet, for them, it was life. The rhythm of society, accepted and carried forward. The life of a woman in ancient Greece was shaped less by her own choice and more by the expectations of the society around her. Where she was born determined much of her path, whether she lived in Athens, in Sparta, or in a rural village. In Athens, women's lives were bound largely to the home. Their world was one of domestic responsibility. Imagine a courtyard house, its walls plain on the outside, but inside filled with activity. A woman moves through the rooms, tending the hearth, grinding grain, preparing meals, and weaving at the loom. The steady sound of thread sliding, of shuttles knocking, fills her hours. Marriage came early, often arranged. A young woman might leave her father's house as a teenager, joining the household of her husband. Her role was to bear children, manage servants or slaves if present, and maintain the order of the home. Her name seldom appeared in public records. To the city, she was invisible. Yet, within the home, her presence was essential. By contrast, women in Sparta lived in a very different rhythm. Their society, shaped by its military culture, gave women more visibility and independence. Spartan women were educated, taught reading and writing, and even trained in physical exercise. Imagine them running, wrestling, or throwing a discus. Activities shocking to outsiders, yet common in Sparta, while Spartan men lived in barracks and trained for war. Women managed estates, oversaw slaves, and ensured the economy of the household continued. They spoke more freely, held more property, and carried greater influence than their Athenian counterparts. Yet their lives were still tied to the needs of the state. Their role was to raise strong children, especially sons who could become warriors. For women in rural communities, whether Athenian or otherwise, life was defined by labor. They rose at dawn, tended goats or sheep, carried water from wells, gathered firewood, and worked alongside men in fields during harvest. Imagine the sun high in the sky, the air heavy with heat, a woman bending low to gather olives, her hands stained with oil. Survival was shared work, and her role was as vital as any. Though excluded from politics, women had central roles in ritual and religion. Festivals often required their participation. In Athens, women wove the sacred peplis, a robe offered to Athena during the Panathenaic festival. Others served as priestesses, highly respected positions that carried both responsibility and honor. Imagine a procession winding through Athens. Women in long robes, carrying baskets of offerings, their steps steady, their faces calm. In ritual, their presence was visible, their voices heard in prayers and hymns. Religion gave them space denied in politics. Even in restricted roles, women exerted influence. They shaped the household, raised future citizens, managed estates in men's absence, and preserved traditions through story and song. Their work sustained society, even if chroniclers ignored their names. Yet inequality was clear. A woman in Athens could not vote, hold office, or own significant property. Her world was limited, her choices few. A woman born a slave faced harsher burdens still, her labor not her own, her survival tied to others' will. Imagine, at dusk, a woman sitting by the hearth, her children gathered around her. She tells them a story of gods and heroes, her voice calm, her hands moving steadily as she spins wool into thread. Outside, the night deepens, the city quiets. She may not stand in the assembly or lead armies, but her role endures, carrying life forward through care, resilience, and memory. The role of women in ancient Greece was shaped by boundaries, yet within those limits they held strength. Their presence sustained households, their rituals upheld faith, their labor preserved communities. Their influence, though often hidden, was essential. To live in ancient Greece was to live in the company of gods. Every aspect of existence, from planting a field to setting sail upon the sea, was tied to divine will. Rituals and ceremonies offered both protection and rhythm, anchoring daily life in something greater than human effort. Faith began at home. Imagine a small Greek house at dawn. In the courtyard, the hearth glows faintly, its fire tended with care. Before it, a woman sprinkles a few grains of barley and pours a little wine, an offering to Hestia, goddess of the hearth. The fire is sacred. It warms the home, cooks the meals, and links the family to the divine. Small altars stood in doorways or courtyards. Families left offerings of bread, oil, or fruit. These were simple acts, repeated daily, reminding them of their dependence on the gods' favor for health, harvest, and protection. On the hills above towns rose great temples. In Athens, the Parthenon stood for Athena. In Olympia, Zeus was honored. In Delphi, Apollo's oracle gave cryptic words to those who sought guidance. Imagine entering such a temple. Columns tower above, their stone cool to the touch. Inside, the air is dim, heavy with the smell of smoke and incense. A great statue of a god or goddess looms, gleaming in bronze or gold. Worshippers approach, laying down offerings, whispering prayers. Sacrifices are made outside, animals offered, their smoke rising skyward, carrying the plea for favor. To the Greeks, these acts were not symbolic alone. They were vital. Without them, the gods might withdraw their protection, sending famine, storm, or defeat in battle. The year was punctuated by festivals. These were moments of both joy and obligation. In Athens, the Panathenaic festival honored Athena with processions, sacrifices, and contests. Women wove a great robe, the peplus offered to the goddess. Athletes competed, musicians performed, poets recited. Imagine standing along the procession route. Citizens march past in robes of white, musicians play flutes, children scatter flowers. At the front, the sacred robe is carried high, destined for the goddess. The crowd watches, united in devotion. At Olympia, every 4 years, the Olympic Games were held in honor of Zeus. Athletes ran, wrestled, and raced chariots. Victors were crowned not with gold, but with olive wreaths, symbols of glory. For a time, wars paused, and the games became sacred space for competition and celebration. The Greeks also sought guidance from oracles. At Delphi, a priestess sat upon a tripod, inhaling vapors, speaking cryptic words believed to come from Apollo himself. Leaders, generals, and ordinary citizens came seeking answers. Should they go to war? Should they plant crops? Should they marry? Imagine kneeling in the smoky chamber of Delphi, the priestess's voice echoing, her words unclear yet powerful. To the listener, her prophecy might shape choices that determined life or death. Omens were read in the flight of birds, in sudden storms, in the entrails of sacrificed animals. The world itself was a message, always speaking of divine will. Death, too, was bound in ritual. Funerals began with the laying out of the body, washed and adorned, surrounded by family. Women sang laments, their voices carrying grief. The body was carried in procession, buried with offerings of pottery, jewelry, or oil. The afterlife was uncertain. Some believed in the underworld ruled by Hades, a shadowy existence. Others spoke of the Isles of the Blessed, where heroes might rest in peace. Rituals ensured safe passage. Offerings ensured remembrance. In a world without certainty, rituals gave rhythm. The gods were capricious, yet devotion offered reassurance. Festivals brought joy. Oracles gave direction. Daily offerings provided connection. Imagine now a village at night. Families gather around small hearths, the glow of fire steady. A prayer is whispered, a bit of bread placed on the flames. Outside, the world is vast and uncertain. Inside, in the quiet act of ritual, there is comfort. For the Greeks, belief was not distant, not abstract. It was woven into every meal, every festival, every decision. It gave meaning, connection, and hope. In ancient Greece, survival depended on what the land, the sea, and the seasons could provide. Food was simple, health was fragile, and the burdens of life were carried daily, with little relief. Imagine sitting at a small wooden table in an Athenian home. Before you, a meal is laid out. Not a feast, but what most families knew each day. Bread, dense and dark, made from barley. A few olives, their flavor sharp and salty. A piece of cheese, perhaps goat's milk, crumbly and tangy. Beside it, a small jug of wine, diluted with water. This was the staple. Bread, oil, wine. The Mediterranean triad that fed generations. Vegetables, beans, lentils, onions, garlic, added variety. Fish was common, especially near the coast, where nets pulled in sardines or mackerel. Meat was rare, usually reserved for sacrifices or festivals. When animals were slaughtered for the gods, portions of the meat were shared among the people. Imagine the smell of roasted goat filling the air, a luxury enjoyed only on occasion. Fruits sweetened the diet. Figs, grapes, apples, honey served as their sugar, drizzled over cakes or stirred into wine. But food was never abundant. A poor harvest, a dry season, or a disrupted trade route could bring hunger. Imagine a family in a rural village, their store jars nearly empty at winter's end. Meals shrink to thin gruel, bellies tighten, and survival becomes uncertain. Illness in ancient Greece was common, and medicine limited. Physicians like Hippocrates observed carefully, writing of humours, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, whose balance determined health. Treatments sought to restore this balance through diet, exercise, herbs, or, at times, bloodletting. Imagine lying in bed with fever, the air heavy around you. A physician arrives, examining your pulse, asking questions. He prescribes rest, perhaps a decoction of herbs, perhaps a change of diet. His knowledge is sincere, but his tools are limited. Many recover on their own. Many do not. Childbirth was especially dangerous. Without skilled assistance, mothers and infants often perished. Families prayed to Artemis, goddess of childbirth, seeking her protection. Imagine the fear and hope mingled together in a dimly lit home, a midwife working steadily, a family whispering prayers in the next room. In towns and cities, disease spread quickly. Streets were narrow, sanitation poor, water sources limited. Outbreaks of plague, fever, or dysentery swept through households. Survival was fragile, and death an ever-present possibility. Beyond food and health lay other struggles. Taxes weighed heavily, demanded by city-states to fund armies or fleets. Farmers surrendered grain, craftsmen coin. Slaves carried the hardest burdens, their lives given to labor without reprieve. Children worked from an early age, gathering wood, helping in fields, tending animals. Education was limited mostly to boys of citizen families, leaving others without access to learning. For women, hidden burdens were constant. Bearing children, weaving cloth, preparing meals, fetching water, their lives filled with unceasing tasks, unrecognized but vital. Even leisure carried hardship. For peasants and the poor, there was little time to rest. For soldiers, endless drills and campaigns wore down body and spirit. For sailors, voyages were perilous, storms and pirates threatening survival at sea. And yet, amid these hardships, people endured. Meals, though simple, were shared with family and neighbors. Illness was met with care, rituals, and faith. Festivals broke the monotony, bringing laughter and music. Imagine a family at night. The fire glows in the hearth, a pot of lentils simmering. Children eat hungrily, their parents speaking softly of tomorrow's work. Outside, the world is uncertain. Inside, there is warmth, continuity, and the quiet strength of survival. Life in ancient Greece was never easy. Food was plain, health fragile, burdens constant. For us today, accustomed to medicine, abundance, and comfort, survival in their world would have been difficult. Yet for them, it was life, woven together by resilience, faith, and the daily rhythm of endurance. Life in ancient Greece was demanding, yet it was never without moments of joy. For every day spent in toil, there were songs sung, stories told, games played, and festivals celebrated. Entertainment was not only leisure, it was part of survival, a way to remind people of beauty and meaning in their world. Music was everywhere. Imagine sitting in a shaded courtyard as evening falls. A man plucks the strings of a lyre, the notes soft and gentle, accompanied by his voice. He sings of heroes, of love, of the gods. Children lean close, their eyes heavy with sleep, lulled by melody. The lyre, the flute, and the kithara were common instruments. Songs were woven into rituals, labor, and celebration. Farmers sang while harvesting, rowers kept time with chants, mothers soothed infants with lullabies. Music also accompanied poetry. The verses of Homer were not read silently but performed, chanted with rhythm, their words carried by song. The Greeks gave the world the theatre. Carved into hillsides, vast open-air theatres held thousands. Imagine sitting on a stone bench as the sun sets, the air filled with anticipation. On the stage below, actors in masks and robes speak in strong voices, their words echoing. Tragedies told of fate, of suffering, of human struggle. Comedies poked fun at politicians, at daily life, at the quirks of society. In both audiences saw themselves reflected, their burdens, their laughter, their fears. Festivals such as the Dionysia in Athens made theatre a central part of life. Citizens gathered not only to watch, but to participate in a shared experience. For a time, divisions of class and status faded, replaced by collective emotion. The Greeks valued physical skill. From childhood, boys learned running, wrestling, and discus. Competitions were held regularly, the most famous at Olympia. Imagine the Olympic Games. The heat of summer shimmers on the plain, crowds gather, the air filled with excitement. Athletes race barefoot across the dust, their muscles straining, their movements swift. Victors are crowned with olive wreaths, their names carried home in songs of praise. These games were not only contests of strength, but also acts of devotion, honoring the gods. They gave people pride, identity, and release from daily burdens. Stories carried entertainment as much as wisdom. Around hearths, in taverns, in workshops, tales of gods and heroes were told. Imagine a storyteller leaning forward, his voice low, describing Odysseus bound to the mast, resisting the call of the sirens. The listeners sit in silence, imagining the sea, the songs, the struggle. Such stories were not only escape, they were education. They taught courage, loyalty, cleverness, and respect for the gods. They gave meaning to lives filled with uncertainty. Perhaps the greatest escapes came through festivals. Each city had its calendar, filled with days of sacrifice, processions, music, and feasting. These festivals honored gods and bound communities together. In Athens, the Panathenaea brought the whole city into celebration. Imagine processions of citizens, musicians, dancers, priests, and priestesses moving through the streets. At night, torches lit races across the city, flames flickering against the dark sky. For a time, burdens lifted. Food and drink were shared, laughter echoed, and life was celebrated. Imagine yourself in a small Greek village at night. The day's work is done, and neighbors gather in a courtyard. Someone begins to play the flute. Children dance in circles. Laughter rises into the warm air. Above, the stars shine steadily. The world beyond may be uncertain, survival fragile. But here, in music, in laughter, in shared stories, the people of ancient Greece found escape. Entertainment did not erase hardship, but it made life bearable, weaving joy into the fabric of endurance. To walk through ancient Greece was to walk through a landscape of symbols. The built world reflected not only necessity, but belief, power, and identity. Each structure, from the humblest home to the grandest temple, carried meaning that shaped daily life. Most homes were simple, built from mud brick and timber. Imagine entering such a dwelling. The walls are plain, the floors packed earth. A small courtyard opens to the sky, the hearth at its center. Around it, rooms for cooking, weaving, and sleeping. The house is modest, yet functional. Chickens wander the courtyard, clay jars line the walls, tools rest against the corners. Here, life unfolds quietly. Meals are prepared, children play, weaving continues endlessly. The simplicity of these homes reminds us survival was built upon utility, not luxury. Yet, within these walls, families found continuity, the rhythm of daily existence. At the other end of the spectrum stood the temples, vast, gleaming structures that dominated skylines. Imagine standing before the Parthenon on the Acropolis, its marble glowing in sunlight. The columns rise high, precise and balanced, each one a statement of devotion to Athena. Temples were more than buildings, they were symbols of identity. For Athenians, the Parthenon was pride, belief, and unity. For other city-states, their temples bound them to their patron gods, marking their place in the divine order. Inside, great statues stood. Athena, Zeus, Apollo, their forms gilded, painted, larger than life. Worshippers approached with awe, leaving offerings at altars. The temples embodied faith, permanence in a world of uncertainty. Theaters carved into hillsides were another defining feature. Imagine the semicircle of stone benches rising above a stage. Thousands could gather here, their voices carried easily in the natural acoustics. Here, the community came together. Tragedy and comedy unfolded, stories of fate and folly, of gods and men. These theatres were not only places of entertainment, but also of reflection, where society examined itself, its burdens, its joys. At the heart of towns and cities lay the agora, open squares surrounded by colonnades and shops. Imagine walking through one in Athens. Merchants call out prices, children chase each other, philosophers gather to debate beneath shaded porticos. The agora was not only a marketplace, but the heart of civic life. It symbolized the freedom of the citizen, the space where decisions were made, ideas exchanged, and community formed. City walls, too, marked the built world. Stone ramparts encircled Athens, linking to the port of Piraeus through long walls that ensured connection even in siege. These fortifications spoke of fragility, of the ever-present threat of war. Imagine standing atop a wall at dusk, the view stretching outward to hills and sea. Beyond lies uncertainty, but within the walls there is protection, order, and life. Every structure carried meaning. Homes symbolized continuity. Temples embodied faith. Theaters reflected shared identity. Agoras symbolized community. Walls embodied survival. Together, they created a landscape not just of stone, but of memory, resilience, and symbolism. Imagine now walking at twilight through the ruins of an ancient city. Columns still stand, though weathered. The outlines of homes remain faint in stone. The theatre lies quiet, its benches empty. The agora is still, its stones warmed by the day's sun. In silence, these structures speak. They remind us that life was not only survival, but meaning. Built into walls, carved into stone. Held in spaces where people gathered, prayed, debated, and endured. Behind the brilliance of temples, the pride of democracy, and the beauty of Greek art, there lay a world of hidden burdens. Survival was never free. It came at the cost of labor, of service, of sacrifice, demanded again and again from those who lived in the city-states. For many Greeks, the weight of taxes was constant. In Athens, citizens paid levies to fund the navy. Fleets of triremes that protected trade but drained private wealth. Nobles were expected to perform liturgies, public services at their own expense, sponsoring plays, funding processions, or equipping warships. Imagine a wealthy citizen approached by officials, reminded that it is his turn to finance a festival. He sighs, calculating the cost, knowing refusal would bring shame. For him, wealth was not only privilege, but obligation. For farmers and craftsmen, taxes were more direct, a portion of grain, of oil, or of coin given to the state. Each harvest brought worry. Would there be enough to feed the family after the state had taken its due? Beyond Athens, tribute was demanded from allied states within the Delian League. Coin and goods flowed to Athens, enriching the city but straining others. Resentment grew, hidden beneath the flow of silver into Athenian treasuries. Daily labor itself was burden enough. Farmers rose at dawn, working long hours in fields, their backs bent, their hands calloused. Craftsmen hammered bronze, shaped clay, wove cloth, their workshops filled with noise and dust. Even leisure carried the shadow of labor. A festival meant days of preparation, weaving, cooking, gathering wood, preparing sacrifices. Behind every celebration lay hours of unseen effort. For men, another burden loomed. Military service, every citizen was expected to fight. In times of war, farmers left their fields, craftsmen their shops, sailors their homes. They took up shields and spears, rode triremes, marched in phalanxes. Imagine a farmer in his 30s. His fields are ready for harvest. His family depends on him. Yet he is called to war. He lifts his heavy bronze shield, dons his helmet, and marches with his fellows. Behind him, his family watches, uncertain if he will return. For the state, this was necessity. For the man, it was a burden, carried quietly, too often with loss. Women and hidden strain. For women, burdens were unending, but less recorded. They managed households alone, while men were away, raised children, and worked in fields when needed. They fetched water from wells, sometimes walking long distances, balancing jars upon their heads. Their work was constant, essential, and largely invisible to history. Slaves, and the greatest burdens for slaves, burdens were heaviest of all. Their labor supported households, farms, and mines. Many were forced into back-breaking work underground, cutting silver or stone. Imagine the darkness of the mines, the air thick, the work endless. For them, survival was not a matter of choice but endurance. Emotional costs beyond labor and taxes lay emotional strain. The uncertainty of harvests, the fear of plague, the danger of war. These weighed constantly upon families. Imagine a mother watching her child cough through the night with no medicine to ease the illness, or a farmer staring at dry soil, praying for rain that does not come. These quiet struggles rarely appear in chronicles, but they were the fabric of survival. A closing image, imagine now a quiet Athenian street at dusk. Citizens return from the assembly, craftsmen close their shops, women finish their weaving. From the outside, the city glows with life, but behind closed doors, burdens press heavily, coins counted carefully, food measured sparingly, worries whispered softly in the dark. The brilliance of Greece was real, but so too were its hidden costs. For most, life was not a golden age, but a constant effort to meet demands that never ceased. For us today, used to comfort and choice, these burdens would be overwhelming. For them, it was simply survival. The Greeks lived in a landscape not of one kingdom, but of many. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes, and dozens more. Each city-state, or polis, had its own laws, its own armies, its own identity. They shared language, religion, and festivals, but they were rarely united for long. City-states formed alliances out of necessity. Athens, powerful at sea, gathered allies into the Delian League. Contributions of ships, soldiers, and coin flowed into its treasury. On paper, this was an alliance against Persia. In reality, Athens grew stronger, and resentment grew among its opposed partners. Sparta, dominant on land, forged its own network of allies through the Peloponnesian League. Its allies supported its armies, bound by fear, respect, and obligation. Imagine envoys traveling from city to city. They arrive with scrolls, carrying proposals of alliance. In the council chamber, citizens debate to align with Athens and its fleets, or with Sparta and its hoplites. Each choice carries risk. Conflict was frequent. The Persian Wars at the start of the 5th century BCE brought brief unity, as city-states fought together against a vast empire. Victories at Marathon, Salamis, and Plataea became legends. But soon after, rivalries returned. The greatest struggle was the Peloponnesian War, lasting nearly 3 decades. Athens and Sparta, once allies against Persia, turned against one another. The war consumed resources, drained lives, and left scars across Greece. Imagine a farmer in Attica, his fields abandoned as Spartan troops approach. He flees to Athens, crowding within its walls, where plague soon spreads. His harvest lost, his family weakened. He endures as best he can, the war far beyond his control. Diplomacy was not only for rulers. Ordinary people felt its weight. A treaty might bring relief, reopening markets and easing taxes. A broken alliance might mean sudden war, raids upon villages, or ships blockading harbors. Survival could shift in a single season. Imagine a herald arriving in a town square, unrolling a decree. His voice carries the words of a new treaty. Peace declared, alliances reshaped. For the people listening, the meaning is immediate. Sons may return from war. Grain may arrive safely by ship. The rhythm of life, for a time, steadies. At times, unity was attempted. The Olympic Games were one such moment. Wars paused, at least in theory, to allow athletes and spectators safe passage. Imagine the sight. Men from rival cities competing side by side. The air filled with cheers, the olive crown awaiting the victor. But these moments were rare. The default state of Greece was rivalry. Each polis guarded its independence, suspicious of neighbors, proud of its own traditions. Diplomacy could ease tension, but it seldom erased it. Wars reshaped the Greek world again and again. Athens rose to glory, then fell. Sparta triumphed briefly, then waned. Thebes rose, then declined. Eventually, Macedonia, under Philip II and Alexander the Great, would overshadow them all. For ordinary people, these shifts were not matters of pride, but of survival. A change in alliance meant new taxes, new demands for soldiers, new uncertainty. Imagine standing in a small Greek port at sunrise. Ships line the harbor, their sails ready, their hulls filled with soldiers and supplies. Envoys stand nearby, exchanging words, sealing agreements with handshakes. For the leaders, this is strategy. For the sailors, for the farmers pressed into service, it is survival. Diplomacy and war were the twin rhythms of Greek life. Together, they shaped not only the fate of cities, but the lives of every family within them. For us today, accustomed to stability, this constant uncertainty would be nearly impossible to endure. For them, it was the world itself. The world of ancient Greece was brilliant, but brilliance came at a cost. Wars drained treasuries, rivalries divided cities, and ordinary people bore the heaviest burdens. As the centuries passed, this weight left cracks that no festival, no temple, no speech could fully conceal. By the end of the Peloponnesian War, Greece was weary. Athens, once radiant with wealth and power, lay weakened, its walls damaged, its navy diminished, its confidence shaken. Sparta, though victorious, carried its own burden. Stretched too thin, unable to sustain dominance. Imagine citizens gathered in the agora of Athens after the war's end. Their voices are subdued, their faces lined with exhaustion. Taxes remain, grain is scarce, and sons are gone. The victory songs are silent, replaced by murmurs of survival. Alliances, too, carried seeds of resentment. Athens had drawn wealth from its allies in the Delian League, turning shared defense into empire. Cities, once loyal, grew resentful, their tribute resented, their autonomy eroded. Rebellions rose and fell, leaving scars of mistrust. In Sparta's Peloponnesian League, resentment also simmered. Allies grew weary of Spartan dominance, its harsh demands, its military obsession. What had once been protection now felt like burden. Imagine a smaller city-state, Corinth or Thebes, weighing its choices. To ally with Athens meant tribute. To ally with Sparta meant obligation. To remain neutral meant vulnerability. Each choice created frustration. Each path new enemies. Within the city-states themselves, inequalities deepened. Citizens argued, factions formed, and class divisions sharpened. In Athens, democracy brought voice to citizens, but excluded women, slaves, and foreigners. In times of strain, this exclusion grew more visible. Imagine a craftsman in Athens. He pays taxes, he rows in the navy, he serves in the assembly, yet beside him lives a metic, a foreigner who works just as hard but has no voice, no rights, no recognition. Resentment brews quietly, a fracture in the city's unity. These strains did not destroy Greece at once, but slowly they weakened the bonds that held city-state strong. Out of this weakness, change emerged. Thebes briefly rose to power, challenging Sparta. Athens rebuilt itself in part, though never to its former glory. And then, from the north, Macedonia grew strong. Philip II, and later his son Alexander, would take advantage of Greek division, uniting the city-states not by alliance, but by conquest. What the Greeks had failed to do, create lasting unity, was achieved by outsiders. It was the beginning of a new era, the age of empire, the spread of Greek culture far beyond its homeland. For ordinary people, these great shifts were felt not in speeches, but in fields and homes. Wars meant sons lost, fields burned, harvests uncertain. Resentment meant new rulers, new taxes, new demands. Decline was not an event, but a quiet erosion of stability, felt day by day. Imagine a farmer in Boeotia, standing in his field. His father once fought for Athens, his grandfather for Sparta. He has seen alliances shift, armies march, treaties signed and broken. For him, the decline of Greece is not a headline, but the steady wear of survival against forces beyond his control. Picture Greece in the twilight of its classical age. Temples still gleam, theatres still echo with voices, philosophers still debate beneath porticos, yet beneath the brilliance, cracks spread. Resentment, weariness, inequality, the seeds of change are already planted, waiting for the winds of history to carry them forward. For us today, it reminds us that even the most radiant societies carry burdens, and that decline often comes not in sudden collapse, but in the quiet, steady weight of too much asked for too long. When we think of ancient Greece today, the images that come to mind are not of hunger, disease, or burden. They are of temples glowing white in the sun, of philosophers speaking with calm wisdom, of statues and dramas, of glory that feels eternal. Yet beneath those images lies the reality. Survival was fragile, and much of the brilliance we admire was carved out of struggle. Greek philosophy endured more powerfully than its wars. The words of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle still reach us today. Their questions about virtue, justice, and the nature of the soul transcend the dusty streets in which they were spoken. Imagine a teacher under an olive tree, his students seated in the shade, listening as he asks simple yet profound questions. Those voices carry still centuries later. This memory is selective. The lives of ordinary Greeks, their worries about harvest or illness, are mostly absent from philosophy. What endures are ideas, polished, elevated, timeless. Greek art and literature also became monuments in memory. The tragedies of Sophocles, Euripides, and Aeschylus still echo in theatres across the world. Homer's epics, though composed earlier, became central to Greek identity, remembered as the songs of heroes. Yet these works, too, remind us of survival. Tragedies spoke of suffering, of the power of fate, of the fragility of human joy. Comedies laughed at politicians, at foolishness, at the constant struggles of ordinary life. Even their art carried shadows of reality. The Greeks remembered their victories with pride. Marathon, Salamis, Plataea, battles where they defied mighty Persia. These became part of identity, celebrated in stories and monuments. Yet their defeats and decline were remembered less proudly, sometimes softened, sometimes forgotten. The legacy of rivalry also endured. Athens remembered its democracy, Sparta its discipline, Thebes its brief glory. Each city carried pride, long after power faded. The ruins themselves became memory. The Parthenon still stands, though weathered. The theatre of Epidaurus still carries voices with perfect clarity. Columns rise from the earth, silent yet eloquent. Imagine walking among these ruins today. The sun warms the marble, cicadas hum in the distance. You touch the grooves of a column carved over 2,000 years ago. In that touch, memory bridges time, from their world of survival to ours of reflection. Greek memory has always blended myth and fact. Heroes like Pericles, Achilles, and Odysseus live alongside statesmen and philosophers. The line between history and legend blurs. For the Greeks themselves, this blending was not weakness but strength. Myths gave meaning, turning survival into story, hardship into heroism. The legacy of Greece lives not only in ruins or texts, but in our own world. Democracy, philosophy, drama, architecture, all trace lines back to Greece. Their questions remain our questions. Their art still inspires. Their memory has outlived their struggles. Yet it is important to remember the other side of legacy, the fragile lives behind the brilliance. For every statue carved, there were laborers quarrying stone in heat. For every play performed, there were women weaving garments, unseen. For every philosopher, there were farmers bent in fields, their names forgotten. The legacy of Greece is not only of marble and thought, but of endurance. Ordinary people surviving in a difficult world, their lives the true foundation upon which brilliance was built. Imagine standing at dusk upon the Acropolis. The Parthenon rises before you, its stones golden in fading light. Tourists walk softly around you, their voices hushed. Beyond, the city of Athens sprawls, alive with modern sound and light. The memory of Greece is everywhere, in ruins, in books, in the very words we speak. Yet beneath that memory lies the truth, a world both brilliant and burdened, where survival itself was an achievement. As we look back on ancient Greece, it is easy to admire the marble temples, the dramas, the philosophies, and the art. Yet beneath all of it was a fragile world, one in which survival itself was never certain. Imagine yourself transported into that time. The year is 450 BCEU. Wake not in a soft bed, but on a mattress of straw. The air cool, your stomach already uneasy with hunger. Breakfast is a piece of coarse bread dipped in diluted wine. You carry water from a well, grind grain for flour, and prepare for a day of unending labor. Every season carries risk. Drought can wither crops, storms can sink ships, disease can sweep through homes. A simple fever may take your life. A poor harvest may leave you and your family hungry for months. War may call you from your fields to fight battles you did not choose. This was the rhythm of life in ancient Greece. Fragile, uncertain, always balancing on the edge of survival. Now compare this to the world you live in today. You rise in warmth, with clean water at the turn of a tap. Food is abundant, varied, and secure. Medicine waits in cabinets. Hospitals stand ready with knowledge far beyond anything Hippocrates could imagine. Wars, if they come, are distant for many. Your days are not ruled by drought or harvest, but by choices and comforts unknown to the ancients. Where the Greeks lived in fragility, we live in stability. Where they carried constant burdens, we carry freedoms. Where they sought survival each day, we often take it for granted. And yet, reflecting on their world, there is much to admire. Despite hardship, they endured. They built temples, wrote poetry, sang songs, and created philosophies that still shape our lives. Their resilience carried them forward, their brilliance carved from difficulty. To imagine life in ancient Greece is to feel gratitude for our present. Gratitude for warmth, for security, for clean water, for medicine, for the quiet we know as ordinary. What was once extraordinary is now everyday. Imagine now lying where you are. Your bed is soft. Your room is still. No armies march beyond your walls. No envoys call you to war. No harvest determines if you will eat tomorrow. You are safe, at peace, in a world their struggles made possible. The contrast is sharp, but it is also comforting. To remember their world is to honor resilience. To reflect on ours is to rest with gratitude. Imagine now that the day has ended in ancient Greece. The sun lowers toward the horizon, its light golden across the Aegean Sea. The water glimmers softly, waves lapping gently against the shore. Fishing boats return, their sails slack in the evening breeze. In the fields beyond the villages, the day's labor is finished. Farmers walk slowly homeward, their shadows stretching long across the earth. The scent of olive trees hangs in the air, mingled with wood smoke drifting from hearths already lit. High above, the Acropolis glows faintly in the last light. The columns of the Parthenon catch the sun's fading rays, turning warm, golden, and then pale as dusk gathers. Soon, the great temple is outlined only against the stars. The streets of Athens grow quiet. Merchants close their stalls. Children return indoors. Dogs settle in doorways. In small courtyards, families share their evening meals. Bread, olives, lentils simmered slowly. Their voices are low, steady, softened by the calm of night. Farther inland, in villages, the rhythm is the same. A mother sits at the hearth, spinning wool as she speaks gently to her children. Outside, the sky deepens into indigo, the first stars emerging. Cicadas sing in the grass, their sound steady, almost like a lullaby. On the coast, the sea grows dark, the moon rising above its surface. The air is cool, carrying the scent of salt. Waves wash steadily against stone, their rhythm constant, unhurried, the noise of rivalry, of debate, of war. All of it fades in this hour. What remains is only the steady rhythm of ordinary life, the quiet strength of people at rest. Temples stand in silence, fields lie calm, the sea breathes softly against the shore. And as you imagine this world, it, too, begins to fade. The columns blur, the voices grow faint, the fields dissolve into shadow. What remains is only the calm, the stillness of night, the quiet of your own breath, the comfort of rest. The story of ancient Greece is complete. The burdens are set down. The past grows silent, leaving only peace. And now, as you remain here, music will follow, soft, unhurried, like the sea's rhythm. Let it carry you further into quiet, into calm, into sleep. And so, our journey through ancient Greece draws to a close. We have walked through the narrow streets of villages and the grand avenues of Athens. We have sat in simple homes of mud brick, watched farmers in their fields, and listened to philosophers beneath shaded porticos. We have stood in temples, gazed upon statues of gods, and joined the crowds in theatres carved into hillsides. We have also felt the weight of their burdens, the fragility of food supplies, the dangers of illness, the constant pull of war, the endless obligations of taxes, labor, and survival. For women, for slaves, for foreigners, life carried limitations that pressed heavily. Even for the citizens and nobles who held privilege, safety was never secure. And yet, amid hardship, there was brilliance. They wove poetry and song, carved marble into beauty, raised temples that still stand. They invented systems of thought, asked questions of justice and truth, created dramas that still move us today. They carried resilience, turning struggle into culture, survival into legacy. For us, imagining their world is humbling. It shows us how fragile life once was, and how easily it might have been lost. It reminds us how fortunate we are to live with clean water, abundant food, medicine, and safety. For us, the burdens of their daily survival would have been almost impossible. And yet, in their struggles, we see the roots of so much we know today. Now, as you rest, the images of Greece can fade. The temples soften into shadow. The voices of philosophers grow quiet. The laughter of children in the agora dissolves into silence. The fields lie still, the sea calms, the stars rise over the ancient land. And here, in your present, you are safe. Your bed is warm. Your breath is steady. The world around you quiet. The past has closed, leaving only calm. As this story ends, music will follow. Soft, slow, like the rhythm of the sea or the hush of wind through olive trees. Let it guide you, carry you deeper, until thought itself fades and sleep gently takes you. The burdens of ancient Greece are gone. The peace of your present remains. Rest in it, safely, quietly, completely.